So moving on to It, the original 1990 TV miniseries. And even though it is a miniseries, I think it's fine to just refer to it as a movie. The story revolves around a predatory shape-shifting demon which has the ability to transform itself into its people's worst fears. It mostly takes the human form of a sadistic wisecracking clown called Pennywise.
Is your refrigerator running? It is!
Well, those jokes were funny back then. Yeah, so a group of outcast kids known as the Lucky Seven, or if you're a bully, they're referred to as the Losers Club. They discover Pennywise and vow to kill him by any means necessary. This is in 2 parts. So the first part takes place while these main characters are children, back in the 60s, and the second part shows them returning as adults to finally defeat the evil clown Pennywise once and for all. So I guess I should start off by saying that this is in my top 3 of all time. Like I said, I'm going to refer to it as a movie, even though it's a miniseries. It's a movie that scared a lot of people back when it came out. If you were a child watching this back when it was new, and I'm guessing you didn't see it in the 90s, but I remember talking to other people who said they were afraid of going near pipes and any kind of drains or anything like that. So it's a movie that now to people probably comes off as very cheesy and corny, whatever you want to call it. But back then, especially as a child, it's something that really got to me. And because of that, I don't know if I want to use the word traumatized, but it's a movie that even to this day, when I hear certain scenes with the music and some of the Pennywise sightings, especially in the first half, really still give me goosebumps. And that's obviously, it's based on my time watching it as a child. So I think overall it's acted fairly decently, even though the second half does turn into a bit of a TV soap drama and loses a bit of its horror aspect. Tim Curry puts in one of the best performances, I think, that you'll see for a horror character, horror personality. And despite the second half not being anywhere near as good as the first half, I still think overall it's a fantastic movie.
So, this is a movie that... There's so much to talk about when it comes to this one. Now, I was born in 1993, so I was, 3 years late to missing the premiere. I still saw this when I was a kid. I saw this so many times. My parents really liked this, so we had like an old VHS copy, and if we didn't, we always got it out from the VHS store. That's the 2 VHS tapes, part 1, part 2. So when I was a kid, I saw this movie so many times. It's actually probably one of the first horror movies, non-black and white horror movies I saw growing up. It's probably... I know I saw it before Nightmare on Elm Street. And another influential movie when I was growing up was actually another Stephen King adaptation titled The Night Fly from 1997, which actually is a vampire movie. But since I saw that one as a kid, that one also really freaked me out. This one terrified me. The whole Pennywise, it just terrified me. The music, fantastic music. It's a very creepy carnival-like feel. The opening sequence, which a young, girl gets... it's out of screen, it's a television production, but just gets massacred by this just creepy clown behind waving sheets, laundry hanging up. There's so many things in this movie that I remember when I saw as a kid that just freaked me out. The whole shower scene with Adi Kasbrak. It doesn't necessarily look good today, but it's still such a creepy concept. Just that gloved hand popping out of the drain pipe. There's just so many things. At the same time, watching it nowadays, and being a giant fan of the book, which I've read so many times. I try to read it once a year since I was back in middle school. There's so many things this leaves out that I just can't help but take notice of. And obviously this movie means a lot to a lot of people who grew up in that time. So if people enjoy this movie, that's great. And I still, by and large, I really enjoy the movie. But there's just so many things, despite even a really long running time, that they could do. Or maybe they did have the money to do, or they just couldn't throw in, that would have really benefited this. Out of this side, I still think it's a pretty decent television production. If you happen to see it when you're a kid, you're probably never going to forget it. if you happen to be an adult tuning in to what happened like 30 years ago, it may not have much of an impact. But it is a fantastic performance by Tim Curry, some really creepy things, and definitely one that shaped my love for the horror genre.
Just listening to you describing them, especially the earlier scenes, like the laundry sheets, and yeah, I was just getting goosebumps just then thinking about it. I mean, what a way to open. I think it's a movie that only takes 10 seconds to start giving me, like the hairs on my arms start raising, and just seeing the title with the music behind it. I don't know. It's still to this day gets to me.
And also the way the movie, and the book did the same thing, the way the movie goes, it starts up in present day, and then you slowly learn the story through flashbacks of the main characters after they get mysterious phone calls. I think it's just a fantastic idea, and I think despite them missing something, I think they did a really good job with this one. And that's one thing I had with the remake, because of the way they just focused on the early day stuff. Because of that, they're not really going to be able to do this whole flashback thing I thought this version did so well. But I guess that's a discussion for a later time.
I mean, you were mentioning earlier that it's left out so many things from the novel, and I guess I should state, and anyone who's watched our show before will know that I don't read novels. I just don't have the attention span to kind of just sit down and spend so much time reading. So I'm purely looking at this from just being a movie and not how it's been translated from the book.
Yeah, it's difficult, because I obviously saw this movie long before I read the book. And then when I finally read the book, because that's again one of my father's, it's a book he went back to so often. So I read the book at a somewhat young age, and even reading the book, I mean, you think watching the movie terrifies you, just reading the book, when I was like 10, 11 years old, it terrified the shit out of me. I mean, it doesn't matter if you go book or movie, it's just going to terrify you if you're young. So it's really hard to get away from the very nostalgic feelings I have even in watching it. I'm sure Chuck has seen this movie a lot, and I know I've seen it so many times. It's just such a nostalgic feeling in watching it. But at the same time, it can't get out of my head. Well, it would have been really cool if they did this, or maybe if they changed some of the really corny dialogue in the second half. I mean, that's not to say that the second half is terrible. There's a lot of decent things in it. In fact, I even like the opening where present-day Bill Danbro sees Pennywise dig in a grave, in the graveyard. Just sort of a creepy little scene. I don't know, there's a lot to like about it, but trying to break away from what I know after reading the books is somewhat difficult.
Well, with part 2 not being quite as good, I guess the great thing about it is that even though, on the DVD and Blu-ray versions have kind of spliced it all together as one movie, if you do have either the original VHS in 2 parts or the original television recording in 2 parts, they actually do play the credits after the first part. So you could even just stop it right there and treat that first part as just the movie itself. And that also, the ending of part 1 has a scene, the suicide scene, which really gets to me as well.
Yeah, I thought the way they did that was pretty fantastic.
Yeah.
Just a really slow building up music in the background, and then when she finally sees it, it's a fantastic conclusion. I mean, you can buy your ass after people saw that on TV, they came back the next night.
Oh yeah, definitely. The scream she lets go at the end with it on the wall, and yeah, that definitely gets to me. Yeah. One other thing I thought I'd mention is that, and I'm not sure what it was like for the VHS over there, but the VHS that I used to rent and watch actually had some things cut out. I guess maybe because it was too long to put everything on one VHS, I'm not sure, but they did just trim a few parts of the movie. One noticeable part was they trimmed out Georgie going into the basement to get the glue or whatever you call that stuff, even though that's a very short scene.
I'm thinking about it saves like 5 seconds.
Well, it might be 30 seconds, I'm not sure, but then they would also trim sometimes like the last 20 seconds of each flashback in part 1. Yeah, so I don't know, just when I got the DVD, I started seeing all these little extra bits and pieces, which got me excited. So, and I know the DVD itself still doesn't have everything that the TV version had, because I believe it was in the second part, there is a scene where they're leaving the hotel There's some extra footage there. Nothing too special, but just something extra. And if you haven't seen that, you can always go on YouTube. I'm sure it's on there. Another thing is, a long time ago, I did create... I don't know how big trolling was, but I did upload a scene from it where I took the Ben flashback scene from part 1, where he's getting the phone call from Mike asking him to come back, and I've put this video up on YouTube where he just says, no, I'm not coming back, and then he goes back to banging his lady friend.
I don't know. I will say, I mean, there's so many things I could talk about. I just really enjoyed how he had, like, he was just living in, like, this really large complex. I don't know. His living style is really interesting to me. And that's a completely different opening to Bond's character than what we got from the books. And, I sort of appreciated that change. So, there's one thing I actually wanted to mention, and this may not interest Chucky necessarily, but one of the most interesting changes from the books to this miniseries was that in the books, once everybody got back to Derry, all of them were 100% committed to defeating and killing Pennywise. Whereas in the miniseries, I mean, they're about to leave Derry when Bill finally says, hey, help me, guys, help me. And then they finally say, okay, well, yeah, I guess we'll help you out. Has to be better than interviewing Richard Simmons, I think. Richie says. So it's just a very interesting change. From the books, they were committed from the beginning as soon as they got the phone calls and came back to basically about to leave Derry to Pennywise without doing anything in the miniseries. Just a sort of interesting altercation. Do you have any favorite Pennywise scenes? I know there's so many to choose from. I mean, like, for me, I'll just say one of my favorite ones was always when, near the end of the first part, where they're doing the hand-holding thing and Stan's doing his Boy Scout chant. And then all of a sudden, like, he just hears a whisper, Stanley boy. And then he looks over and Pennywise has him. I mean, that scene, when I was a kid, that scene terrified the shit out of me. It's such a great scene.
Yeah. The majority of the Pennywise sightings in part 1, most of them stand out to me, like the Eddie shower scene, the one that you just mentioned there. But I think if I had to pick one out of all of them, probably the first one that's before all the flashbacks, the laundry sheets. I think that's just a scene where the way it's filmed is just so creepy, and you're seeing this little girl who we don't see anything, but clearly she's been eaten by this clown. You don't even see what remains are left, but obviously there are some remains because the mother sees something when she goes outside. And that one really stands out to me the most, I think.
So I think one of the more amusing ones, one that always cracked me up, which I sort of alluded to earlier, was in the second part when Richie goes to the library and Pennywise is just cracking jokes, like just shouting jokes, and Richie's the only one who can hear it. And he's just screaming at that poor librarian, tell Mike Allen. That scene, I don't know, that just cracks me up. Just with Pennywise, Tim Curry up this, screaming these hideously lame jokes, and that's such a, and the balloons, throwing blood everywhere. That's just a great scene.
Well, I didn't quite enjoy as much the scenes where Pennywise is turned into the Wolfman for Richie, so, I mean, the clown itself is more terrifying in my opinion.
Is the Wolfman more terrifying than the spider, though? Question for the ages.
If I was actually in that situation, I would probably say the spider, but they're both done fairly poorly in my opinion. Well, the spider's probably even more sillier, looking at it through the lens of a movie, but if you're actually there in that situation, I'd probably be more scared of a spider than a wolf man.
I think the main problem with the end was, at the end of the first part, Artie had a pretty kick-ass line, this is battery acid, you slime. And the second part is just, this is battery acid, now you disappear. I mean, it's not very inspired. So I suspect that's mostly Artie's fault.
Yeah, well, that's what happens when you go be a virgin for that long.
Well, I can't help you there, buddy.
Yeah.
I will say the actor who played Richie, Harry Anderson, as an adult, that has to be, and along with John Ritter as Pan, those two characters I thought worked really well together. So while I generally like the kids' performances more, aside from maybe Emily Porkins who does Beverly, there are some really decent actors as adults. It's just the story itself isn't nearly as enthralling.
They are doing a huge documentary on this movie with tons of behind-the-scenes footage that is actually coming out. I don't know if it's later this year or sometime next year. I contributed to, I think it was a Kickstarter campaign for it, so I will get a Blu-ray of it when they finally finish everything. And it's got Tim Curry doing an interview for it, and I don't think he's ever really sat down and done a proper interview for it before. And even though his health has since taken a downturn, which would have been nice to get an interview with him about it back when he was a lot younger, but still, getting it now is going to be very interesting. Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, it's in my top 3. So it comes as no surprise that I'm giving it a 10 out of 10, even though I don't think the second half works nearly as well as the first half. Overall, I still really enjoy it, especially because it's one of those few movies that actually gives me goosebumps even to this day. So a lot of that has to do with the music, the Pennywise encounters. They all stand out rather well. There's only a few of them that don't work as well as the others, and Tim Curry's performance it's just one of the best performances that I've seen for a character in a movie.
Yeah, like I said, this is a difficult one for me. I have such a history with this movie, as many horror fans do. So I can't, entirely discount what it did for me when I was younger. Ultimately, I would give the movie slightly below average, a 6.5 out of 10, rounded up to a 7. There's so many great things about it, and like I said, it really shaped my love for the genre. But at the same time, this is, there's some really corny lines. It's just the whole, when they're kids, oh, how do you know? Oh, he just does. Oh, he just does. It's just a bit much, and leading into the It's Alright song. And when they're adults, I was talking about this earlier, but that line, why does it hate? Why is it so mean? That line, I quote that line all the time nowadays, because it's just it's not a great delivery, it's just not great dialogue. But so there's some things that are problematic. I wish they could throw in more things in the book. I think if you see this when you're younger, though, there's always going to be a nostalgic impression. So even though I did rate it slightly below average, I definitely do not undervalue the importance of this miniseries.